The crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across the marble hall, but the grandeur could not mask the tension. Lena stood in the ivory gown her adoptive mother had chosen, the silk foreign against her skin, the weight of the train anchoring her to a moment she had not chosen. Beside her, Ginho stood with the stillness of a predator, his dark suit tailored to perfection, his expression unreadable. Across the sparse gathering, her parents shifted in their seats, eyes fixed on anything but her face. Soo-yeon clutched a handkerchief, though no tears fell. Min-jae stared at the floor, jaw tight. When Ginho turned to her, his hand came up slowly, fingers gentle as they lifted her chin. The gesture was intimate, possessive, and strangely calm. His eyes searched hers with an intensity that made the room disappear. She saw no cruelty there, only certainty. Lena's voice echoed in her mind, the words she would never speak aloud in this moment. They called me their miracle, until their real miracle arrived. Before you dive deeper into this story of betrayal, transformation, and unexpected power, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens when love turns to abandonment, and a discarded daughter becomes untouchable. Drop a comment below and tell us the country you are watching from. The beginning was different. Years before the wedding, before the Mafia boss, before the quiet betrayal, there was only emptiness. Min-jae and Soo-yeon had built an empire in textiles, their business expanding across Seoul with relentless ambition, but their home remained silent. The rooms echoed. The nursery stayed empty. Month after month, Soo-yeon endured treatments that left her exhausted and hopeful, then devastated. Min-jae watched his wife retreat inward, her laughter fading, her eyes growing distant. Relatives asked questions at gatherings, their concern thinly veiling judgment. His mother mentioned continuation of the family line with increasing frequency. The pressure was a constant hum, a background noise that never ceased. Soo-yeon began avoiding family dinners. Min-jae threw himself into work, staying late at the office, returning home to find his wife already asleep or pretending to be. The distance between them widened, a chasm neither knew how to cross. One evening, after another failed cycle, Soo-yeon spoke the words that had been forming for months. What if we adopt? Min-jae looked up from his laptop, surprise crossing his features. She continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. We have so much love to give. A child needs a home. We need a family. He closed the laptop slowly, considering. The idea had never occurred to him, but as he watched hope kindle in his wife's eyes for the first time in years, he found himself nodding. The orphanage was clean but institutional. The walls painted cheerful colors that could not quite mask the underlying sadness. Children played in the common room, their laughter bright but cautious. Soo-yeon's hand trembled as she walked past the rows of beds. The director led them through, explaining backgrounds and temperaments, but Soo-yeon's attention had already fixed on a girl sitting alone by the window. She was perhaps 6 years old, her dark skin a contrast to the pale winter light, her expression solemn and watchful. She held a book, her finger tracing the words with careful concentration. That's Lena, the director said quietly. She's been with us for 3 years. Very intelligent, very quiet. She observes everything. Soo-yeon approached slowly, kneeling beside the small chair. What are you reading? Lena looked up, her eyes assessing, measuring the woman before her with a gravity beyond her years. A story about a girl who finds her family. The answer pierced Soo-yeon's heart. She extended her hand, palm up, an offering rather than a demand. Lena stared at it for a long moment, then slowly placed her small hand in Soo-yeon's larger one. The touch was tentative, testing. Min-jae watched from the doorway, something tightening in his chest. When Lena glanced at him, he smiled, and after a moment, she smiled back, shy and uncertain. The adoption process took months, paperwork and interviews and home visits, but finally Lena came home. Soo-yeon had prepared her room with care, soft colors and books and toys chosen with thought. Lena stood in the doorway, her single bag clutched in both hands, taking in the space that was now hers. "This is your room," Soo-yeon said softly. "Your home." Lena set down her bag and turned to face them both, her expression serious. "Forever." Min-jae knelt down, meeting her eyes. "Forever? You are ours and we are yours. That's a promise." Lena nodded slowly, then walked to Soo-yeon and wrapped her arms around her waist, holding tight. Soo-yeon's tears came then, hot and relieved, her hand stroking Lena's hair as years of grief and longing found release. The first years were golden. Lena blossomed in the warmth of their attention, her quiet watchfulness giving way to curiosity and joy. She excelled in school, bringing home awards and test scores that made Min-jae beam with pride. He attended every parent-teacher conference, sitting beside Soo-yeon as teachers praised their daughter's intellect and diligence. Birthday parties filled the house with laughter, Lena's face bright with happiness as she opened gifts and blew out candles. Family trips to Jeju Island and Busan created memories captured in photographs that lined the hallway. Lena protected them in small ways, sensing when Soo-yeon felt tired and bringing her tea, noticing when Min-jae seemed stressed and offering quiet company. The love was genuine, uncomplicated, whole. But in the spring of Lena's 10th year, everything shifted. Soo-yeon fainted during a charity luncheon, the room tilting suddenly, the floor rushing up to meet her. Min-jae received the call at the office and arrived at the hospital with his heart hammering. The doctor emerged with an expression of cautious joy. "Your wife is pregnant." The words hung in the air, impossible. Min-jae stared, unable to process. "That's not possible. We tried for years." The doctor smiled. "Sometimes the body surprises us. She's about 8 weeks along. Congratulations." Min-jae entered the room where Soo-yeon sat on the examination table, her face a mixture of shock and wonder. They stared at each other. And then she began to laugh, the sound breaking into sobs, joy and disbelief tangled together. When they told Lena that evening, she jumped up from the dinner table, her eyes wide. "A baby? Really?" Soo-yeon nodded, tears streaming down her face. Lena threw her arms around her mother, then her father, her excitement genuine and unrestrained. But later that night, Lena overheard her grandmother speaking to her aunt in the living room, their voices carrying down the hallway. "Now their real family begins. This is the child they were meant to have." The words settled in Lena's chest like stones, heavy and cold. She retreated to her room, closing the door quietly, staring at the photographs on her dresser. Real family. The phrase echoed. The pregnancy progressed, and the house transformed. The spare room became a nursery, painted soft yellow, filled with new furniture and carefully chosen decorations. Friends and relatives visited constantly, bringing gifts and advice, their attention focused entirely on Soo-yeon's growing belly. Lena watched from the edges, her presence acknowledged but secondary. At the baby shower, the living room overflowed with guests, their laughter and chatter filling every corner. Lena helped serve refreshments, moving through the crowd with quiet efficiency. Soo-yeon opened gifts, each new outfit and toy greeted with delighted exclamations. Someone asked Lena how she felt about becoming a big sister. "Excited," she answered, smiling as expected. The woman patted her head absently and turned back to the conversation about nursery themes. Lena retreated to the kitchen, watching through the doorway as her mother laughed, surrounded by love and attention, radiant with the promise of the child to come. Haun arrived on a crisp autumn morning, her cry strong and healthy. Min-jae called everyone he knew, his voice thick with emotion, announcing his daughter's birth. Soo-yeon held the baby with reverent care, counting tiny fingers and toes, marveling at the small face that held features from both of them. When they brought Haun home, relatives flooded the house again, their arms full of flowers and gifts, their eyes fixed on the infant. Lena stood at the top of the stairs, watching the procession, feeling suddenly like a guest in her own home. She came down slowly, approaching the bassinet where Haun slept. The baby was beautiful, delicate, with Min-jae's nose and Soo-yeon's mouth. Lena reached out tentatively, touching one tiny hand. Haun's fingers curled instinctively around her own. "She's perfect," Lena whispered. Soo-yeon smiled, tired but happy. "She is. And you're going to be the best big sister." Lena wanted to believe it, wanted to hold on to the warmth in those words. But the house felt different now. The air changed, her place in it uncertain. The shift was gradual, so subtle at first that Lena questioned her own perception. Small moments accumulated. Her school award for highest marks in her class arrived on the same day Haun took her first steps. Lena brought the certificate to the living room, where her parents sat on the floor, clapping and encouraging the toddler. "Mom, Dad, I got the Academic Excellence Award." Soo-yeon glanced up briefly. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Put it on the refrigerator." Her attention returned immediately to Haun, who wobbled and fell, then tried again. Min-jae filmed the moment on his phone, his face alight with pride. Lena placed the certificate on the counter and walked to her room, closing the door behind her. She sat on her bed, staring at the wall, trying to understand the ache in her chest. Her 13th birthday fell on a Saturday. She woke early, anticipation humming through her. Downstairs, she found her mother preparing breakfast, Haun in her high chair, smearing oatmeal across the tray. "Happy birthday, Lena," Soo-yeon said, kissing her forehead. "We'll celebrate tonight. Your father is picking up the cake after work." Lena nodded, helping clean Haun's hands, trying to hold on to the promise of celebration. But that afternoon, Haun developed a fever. Soo-yeon's focus shifted entirely, her concern sharp and consuming. Min-jae came home early, the cake forgotten, his attention on the toddler's temperature and the pediatrician's advice. Lena sat in the living room, watching her parents hover over Haun, their worry palpable. When evening came and the fever broke, Soo-yeon collapsed on the couch in relief. "Thank God." Minutja kisaan sa furet. Lena stood. "I'm going to my room." Soo-yeon looked up, suddenly remembering. "Oh Lena, I'm so sorry. We'll celebrate tomorrow, I promise." But tomorrow came with its own demands, and the birthday passed without acknowledgement. The emotional distance widened. Her parents began describing her as mature, self-sufficient, independent. Words that sounded like praise but felt like dismissal. "Lena understands," they would say when another event was missed, another conversation cut short. She did understand. She understood that she had become convenient, easy to overlook, her needs less urgent than those of the child who carried their blood. One evening, Lena passed the master bedroom, the door slightly ajar. Inside, her parents spoke in low tones, thinking her asleep. Min-jae's voice carried frustration. "I know we love Lena, but there's something different about Haun. She's ours in a way that's just fundamental." Soo-yeon hesitated before answering. "I know what you mean. It's not that we love Lena less, but Haun carries our blood. That connection is just there naturally." Lena's hand froze on the stair railing. The words cut deeper than anger or cruelty ever could, because they were honest, spoken without malice, simply acknowledging a truth her parents felt, but had never voiced directly. She retreated to her room, closing the door with careful silence, sitting on her bed in the darkness. "At least Haun carries our blood," the phrase repeated in her mind, carving out the space where certainty used to live. Meanwhile, Min-jae's business empire faced new threats. The textile industry had grown competitive, but this was different. Shipments went missing. Contracts were suddenly canceled. Suppliers reported pressure from unknown sources. Min-jae spent long nights in his office, reviewing accounts, making calls, trying to identify the source of the interference. His competitors were aggressive but played by known rules. This felt coordinated, methodical, like someone was systematically dismantling his operations from the shadows. Soo-yeon watched her husband age under the pressure, his face drawn with worry, his confidence shaken. They discussed selling parts of the company, consolidating, protecting what they could. Then Ginho's name appeared. The introduction came through an intermediary, a business associate who spoke in careful terms about a young man with significant influence and resources. "He's interested in your situation," the associate said. "He might be able to help." Min-jae was skeptical. "Who is he?" The associate's expression grew cautious. "Someone with reach. Someone whose protection is absolute." The word protection carried weight, implications Min-jae understood immediately. But desperation eroded caution. He agreed to the meeting. Ginho arrived at the office on a Tuesday afternoon, his presence commanding without effort. He was younger than Min-jae expected, perhaps 30, his features sharp and handsome, his movements economical and precise. He wore a simple dark suit, no jewelry, nothing ostentatious, but power radiated from him like heat. Two men accompanied him, silent and watchful. Ginho sat across from Min-jae, his gaze steady and evaluating. "Your business is under attack," he said without preamble. "I can stop it." Min-jae leaned forward. "How?" Ginho smiled slightly. "I control the people creating your problems. They work for me." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Min-jae stared, comprehension dawning slowly. "You orchestrated this." Ginho didn't deny it. "I created a situation. Now I'm offering a solution." Soo-yeon, who had insisted on attending the meeting, spoke from beside her husband. "Why? What do you want?" Ginho's attention shifted to her, his expression unreadable. "Marriage." The silence stretched, heavy and disorienting. Min-jae found his voice first. "Marriage? To whom?" Ginho leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "You have 2 daughters. I want to marry one." Soo-yeon's breath caught. "Haun is a child." Ginho shook his head slowly. "Not Haun. Lena." The name hung in the air, impossible and specific. Min-jae struggled to process. "Lena? Why Lena?" Ginho's gaze never wavered. "I've been watching your family. Haun is noticed, celebrated, protected. Lena is overlooked. That interests me." Soo-yeon's voice rose with indignation. "She's our daughter." Ginho tilted his head slightly. "Is she? You treat her like a responsibility you've outgrown. I'm offering her a different life, and you protection from ruin. Think carefully." He stood, his men moving with him. "I'll return in 3 days for your answer." The door closed behind him, leaving Min-jae and Soo-yeon in stunned silence. That night, they argued in whispers, their bedroom door closed. Soo-yeon paced, her hands trembling. "We can't do this. We can't just give our daughter to a mafia boss." Min-jae sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. "What choice do we have? If we refuse, we lose everything. The business, our home, our security." Soo-yeon stopped pacing. "So we sacrifice Lena?" Min-jae looked up, his expression tortured. "She'll live in luxury. She'll have protection, resources, everything she could need." Soo-yeon's voice broke. "Accept a choice. Accept freedom." Min-jae stood, crossing to her. "Think about Haun. Think about her future. If we lose everything, what kind of life can we give her?" The argument shifted, the justifications building. "Lena is strong. She'll adapt. She's always been mature, independent." Soo-yeon grasped at the reasoning. "Ginho seems controlled. He's not violent, not cruel. Maybe it won't be terrible." Min-jae nodded, desperate for reassurance. He chose her specifically. He must see something in her. Maybe he'll treat her well. They were bargaining with themselves, constructing a narrative that made the unbearable seem acceptable. She owes us, Min-jae said quietly. We gave her a home, a family, opportunities. This is how she can repay that. Soo-yeon flinched at the words but didn't contradict them. The decision crystallized, not in a single moment but through accumulated rationalizations, each one making the impossible seem inevitable. If you're as shocked as I am by where this is going, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what you would do in this situation. And don't forget to subscribe because this story is about to take a turn no one expects. Lena discovered the truth the following evening, not through confession but through accident. She came downstairs for water, moving quietly through the darkened house, when she heard her parents' voices in Min-jae's study. The door stood partially open, light spilling into the hallway. She paused, something in their tone catching her attention. We tell her tomorrow, Min-jae said. We explain that it's for the family, that she'll be well cared for. Soo-yeon's voice wavered. How do we explain selling our daughter? Min-jae's response came sharper. We're not selling her. We're securing an alliance. It's different. Lena's hand tightened on the glass. Is it? Ginho demanded marriage in exchange for protecting our business. That sounds like a transaction to me. Min-jae sighed heavily. What would you have me do? Lose everything we've built? Watch Haun grow up in poverty. There it was. The confirmation of everything Lena had felt but refused to believe. She stood frozen in the hallway, her heart hammering, nausea rising in her throat. She pushed the door open fully, stepping into the light. Her parents turned, shock crossing their features. Lena, Soo-yeon breathed. How long have you been there? Lena's voice came steady despite the tremor in her hands. Long enough. You're giving me to Ginho. Min-jae stood, his expression shifting through guilt and defensiveness. It's not like that. Lena stepped further into the room. Then what is it like? Explain it to me. Soo-yeon moved toward her, hands outstretched. Sweetheart, we're in a difficult situation. The business is failing. Ginho can protect us, but he's asked for this alliance. Lena's laugh was harsh and brittle. Alliance. You mean marriage. You mean you're trading me for business protection. Min-jae's voice rose. You'll live in wealth. You'll want for nothing. Lena's eyes blazed. Accept freedom. Accept choice. Accept the family that promised me forever. The accusation hung between them, sharp and unanswerable. Soo-yeon's tears came then, but they looked like guilt rather than grief. We don't have another option. Lena turned to her mother, her voice dropping to something cold and clear. Let me ask you something. If Haun were older, would you send her instead? The silence was absolute. Neither parent spoke, neither met her eyes. Lena nodded slowly, understanding settling like ice in her veins. That's what I thought. She turned and walked from the room, her steps measured and controlled until she reached her bedroom. Only then did she allow herself to collapse, sitting on the floor with her back against the door, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The betrayal was complete, not because they were sending her away, but because in that moment of silence, they had revealed a truth more painful than any words. Blood mattered more than promises, and she had never truly been theirs. The wedding preparations proceeded with cold efficiency. No joy, no celebration, simply arrangements made and executed. Lena moved through the days in a numb haze, speaking when spoken to, complying with requests, her emotions locked behind a wall of ice. Soo-yeon tried to engage her in choosing flowers, selecting music, but Lena's responses were monosyllabic and distant. Whatever you think is best, she would say, her tone empty of inflection. Min-jae avoided her entirely, unable to meet her eyes, his guilt manifesting as absence. Haun, too young to understand the undercurrents, remained cheerful and innocent, occasionally asking her sister why she seemed sad. Lena would smile and deflect, protecting the child from truths too heavy to bear. The ceremony took place in a private hall, attendance sparse and atmosphere cold. No extended family, no friends, just immediate witnesses and legal requirements. Lena wore the ivory gown, her hair styled with precision, her makeup applied by professionals who commented on her beauty with voices that seemed to come from far away. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw a stranger, someone playing a role in a story she didn't recognize. When the doors opened and she walked down the aisle alone, her parents already seated, their faces masks of strained composure, she felt nothing. Ginho waited at the altar, his expression calm and unreadable. His eyes tracked her approach with an intensity that should have frightened her, but instead felt strangely grounding. When she reached him, he extended his hand. She placed hers in it, the touch warm and solid. The officiant spoke words about love and commitment that rang hollow in the cold space. When the moment came for vows, Ginho spoke his clearly and firmly, his gaze never leaving her face. Lena repeated hers mechanically, each word an acknowledgement of reality, rather than a promise of devotion. The officiant pronounced them married. Ginho leaned in slowly, his hand coming up to lift her chin, the gesture gentle despite the possessiveness in it. He searched her eyes, and for a moment, something passed between them, an understanding beyond words. "You are not a sacrifice," he whispered, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "You are mine." The words should have felt like ownership, but instead they carried a strange promise of protection. The reception was brief and awkward, a few toasts made with forced cheer, food served and barely touched. Lena's parents approached her once, Suyeon's eyes red from crying, Minjae's face drawn with guilt. "We hope you'll be happy," Suyeon said, the words sounding like a plea for forgiveness. Lena looked at them both, these people who had given her a home and then traded her away, and felt a distance open that could never be crossed. "I'm sure I will be," she replied, her voice polite and empty. Minjae reached out as if to touch her shoulder, then let his hand fall. They stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment before retreating, leaving Lena alone in a room full of strangers. Ginho's mansion rose from the hillside like a fortress, all clean lines and dark glass, surrounded by walls and security that made clear this was not just a home but a stronghold. Lena sat in the car beside her new husband, watching the gates open, trying to absorb the reality of her new life. Men in dark suits stood at intervals, their eyes tracking the vehicle, their presence a constant reminder of the world she had entered. Ginho helped her from the car, his hand at her elbow, guiding her toward the entrance. Inside, the space was both beautiful and cold, modern furniture and expensive art arranged with precision. A woman in her 50s approached, introducing herself as the head of household staff. "Your rooms are prepared, Mrs. Kong," she said, using Lena's new name. The sound of it felt foreign, like wearing someone else's identity. Ginho led her upstairs, down a hallway lined with closed doors, to a suite at the far end. He opened the door, standing aside to let her enter first. The room was enormous, decorated in soft neutrals, a bed large enough for several people dominating one wall. Windows overlooking the city lights below. An adjoining door stood open, revealing a bathroom of marble and glass. "This is your space," Ginho said from the doorway. "No one enters without your permission." Lena turned to look at him, confusion breaking through her numbness. "Your space? Not ours." He met her gaze steadily. "I have my own rooms. You'll have privacy here. Time to adjust." He moved to leave, then paused. "I don't expect immediate intimacy, Lena. This marriage serves many purposes, but your comfort matters." The door closed behind him, leaving her alone in the vast room, trying to understand a mafia boss who spoke of consent and comfort. The first days passed in a strange limbo. Lena explored the mansion cautiously, learning its layout, observing the rhythms of the household. Staff members were courteous but distant, treating her with formal respect. Ginho appeared for breakfast each morning, reading the newspaper while she ate in silence. He asked simple questions about her comfort, whether she needed anything, if the rooms were satisfactory. She answered briefly, still guarded, still waiting for cruelty that never came. He had business during the days, meetings behind closed doors, phone calls in rapid Korean and English. Lena caught glimpses of his world, men arriving with urgent expressions, conversations that stopped when she passed, the weight of decisions that affected more than just businesses. But she also noticed his attention on her, the way his eyes followed her movements, the careful observation in his expression. He noticed what she ate for breakfast, which books she selected from the library, the times she seemed restless or withdrawn. It was not casual interest but studied focus, as if he was gathering data, learning her patterns. One evening, she found him in his office, the door open, surrounded by files. Among them, she glimpsed her own school records, report cards, awards. He looked up, catching her staring. "I wanted to understand who you are," he said simply. "Beyond what your parents told me." Lena stepped into the room, her curiosity overriding her caution. "And what did they tell you?" Ginho leaned back in his chair. "That you were dutiful, mature, uncomplicated. They were wrong. You're brilliant, observant, and far more complex than they ever bothered to notice." The words landed with unexpected force, recognition from someone who had no obligation to see her at all. Weeks became months, and the dynamic between them shifted in subtle ways. Ginho never forced proximity, never demanded affection, but his presence became constant, a gravitational pull she couldn't escape. He brought her books he thought she'd enjoy, asked her opinions on art purchases for the house, sought her input in ways that suggested he valued her thoughts. One evening, she found him standing in the garden, staring at the city lights, his expression unguarded in a way she'd never seen. She approached slowly. "Are you all right?" He turned, surprise flickering across his features before smoothing into his usual control. "I was thinking about choices. The ones we make, the ones made for us." Lena stood beside him, following his gaze. "Which kind was our marriage?" Ginho was quiet for a long moment. "Both. I chose you. They chose to give you away." He turned to face her fully. "But you had no choice at all." The conversation that followed broke something open between them. Ginho spoke of his own history, growing up in violence, losing his family young, building power from nothing because it was the only way to survive. "I learned early that everything is transactional," he said. "Love, loyalty, protection, all of it has a price. When I saw you at that family dinner your father hosted months before I made my offer, I saw something I recognized. Someone performing a role, pretending to belong while knowing they're fundamentally separate." Lena's breath caught. She had forgotten that dinner. A business event where she'd served and smiled and faded into the background while Haun charmed the guests. "You noticed me?" Jinho's smile was slight but genuine. "You were the only real thing in that room. Everyone else was performing success, happiness, family. You were performing survival. I understood that." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to something raw and unguarded. "They gave you away like you were disposable. I would burn cities before I let you go." The intensity in his words should have frightened her, but instead, Lena felt something shift inside her chest, a loosening of the ice that had encased her heart since the wedding. This was obsession, yes, but it was also recognition, acceptance, a devotion that her own family had never offered. She had been chosen, not for convenience or duty, but because someone saw her and wanted specifically her. The realization was dizzying. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, show some love by hitting that subscribe button and dropping a comment. What do you think will happen next? Let's discuss in the comments below. As Lena settled into her new life, she began to see Ginho's world with clearer eyes. The men who came and went were part of a vast network, operations spanning industries both legitimate and shadowed. Ginho ran his empire with calculated precision, his decisions swift and absolute. But she also saw the respect he commanded, the way grown men deferred to him, the way problems disappeared at his word. One afternoon, she overheard a confrontation in his office. A supplier who had failed to deliver, making excuses. Ginho's voice never rose, but the menace in his calm tone made the man visibly shake. I don't accept failure. Fix this, or I'll find someone who can. The supplier fled, and Ginho emerged to find Lena standing in the hallway. She expected him to be angry at her eavesdropping, but instead he simply said, "This is who I am. I won't apologize for it." Lena nodded slowly. "I'm not asking you to." She began studying his business, reading documents left in the library, asking careful questions. Ginho noticed and began including her in discussions, testing her thoughts on strategy and negotiation. Her intelligence and insight surprised even him. She had spent years observing, analyzing, understanding human nature and motivation from the sidelines of her own family. Now those skills found new purpose. When a contract negotiation stalled, she suggested an approach that addressed the other party's unspoken concerns. Ginho implemented it, and the deal closed within days. He looked at her with new appreciation. You have instincts for this. Lena felt something unfamiliar, pride in her own abilities, recognition that felt earned rather than obligatory. The members of Ginho's organization began to notice her presence, her growing influence. At first, there was skepticism, whispers about the boss's new wife, speculation about her role. But Ginho made his position clear in a meeting she attended by accident, walking in to deliver a message. One of his lieutenants made a dismissive comment, suggesting she shouldn't be present for business discussions. Ginho's response was immediate and cutting. Lena has more strategic sense than half this room. You'll treat her with respect, or you'll find other employment. The room fell silent. From that moment, her position was established. She became someone to be consulted, feared, respected. The transformation from overlooked daughter to untouchable consort was complete. Meanwhile, the consequences of Min-jae's deal became apparent. Ginho had promised protection, and he delivered, the attacks on the business ceasing immediately. But the contracts that followed shifted power incrementally. Clauses that seemed standard were actually transfers of control. Supply chains were reorganized under Ginho's network. Distribution agreements routed through his companies. Min-jae, desperate to maintain appearances of independence, signed each document without fully understanding the cumulative effect. Month by month, the business that had been his life's work became a subsidiary of Ginho's empire. The illusion of ownership masking the reality of absorption. Soo-yeon noticed first, questioning provisions in contracts, expressing concern about their diminishing authority. Min-jae dismissed her worries, insisting everything was fine, they were protected, the business was secure. But late at night, alone in his office, he reviewed the documents and saw the truth. They had traded their daughter for survival. And in doing so, they had surrendered everything. The guilt became unbearable, manifesting in sleepless nights and growing distance from Haun, whose innocent joy reminded him of what he had sacrificed to protect her. A year after the wedding, Min-jae and Soo-yeon arrived at Ginho's mansion, requesting a meeting. The staff informed Lena, who stood in the hallway as they were led to a receiving room, her heart pounding despite her calm exterior. She had not seen them since the wedding, had not spoken to them, had built a life entirely separate from theirs. Ginho appeared beside her, reading her tension. "Do you want me present?" Lena considered, then shook her head. "No. I'll see them alone." He touched her shoulder briefly, a gesture of support, then disappeared down the hallway. Lena entered the room to find her parents standing awkwardly, taking in the opulence around them. They looked older, worn, the weight of their choices visible in their faces. Soo-yeon stepped forward. Lena, you look well. Lena remained by the door, maintaining distance. I am. What do you want? Min-jae cleared his throat. We need to talk to you about the business. Things have become complicated. Lena's expression didn't change. You mean you're realizing Ginho now controls everything you built? Soo-yeon's eyes widened. You knew. Lena crossed her arms. I helped structure some of those contracts. Did you think I was just decorative? The revelation hit them visibly. Min-jae's voice rose with desperation. We need your help. You have influence with him. You could convince him to renegotiate, to restore some of our control. Lena laughed, the sound cold and sharp. Why would I do that? Soo-yeon stepped closer, her voice pleading. Because we're your family. Because we raised you, loved you, gave you everything. The words hung between them, absurd in their presumption. Lena's expression hardened, her voice dropping to something quiet and final. You taught me something important. Blood matters. And I don't share yours. Soo-yeon flinched as if struck. Lena, please. Lena moved to the door, her hand on the handle. You made your choice when you chose to protect Haun at my expense. You told me forever, but you meant until something better came along. Ginho chose me specifically, knowing everything about me, wanting me anyway. That's the difference. Min-jae's voice broke. We're sorry. We made a mistake. Lena paused, looking back at them. You made a calculation. You just didn't account for what I'd become. She opened the door. Goodbye. The finality in the word was absolute. They left, and Lena stood alone in the room, feeling not triumph but a strange, quiet peace. That evening, she found Ginho in his office. He looked up as she entered, his expression questioning. She crossed to him, and for the first time, she initiated contact, her hand reaching for his. He stood immediately, his fingers intertwining with hers. They came to ask for help, she said. I said no. Ginho studied her face. Do you regret it? Lena thought about the question, about the years of love and betrayal, the promises made and broken, the life she'd built from the ashes of abandonment. No. I regret believing them. I don't regret choosing myself. Ginho pulled her closer, his arms coming around her, the embrace protective and possessive. You never have to choose between their approval and your own power again. Lena leaned into him, feeling the truth of it settle in her bones. Days later, they stood together at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his high-rise office. The city spread out below them, lights glittering in the darkness. Ginho's arm rested around her waist, the touch casual now familiar. Do you regret marrying me? He asked quietly. Lena looked at the city, at the empire they were building together, at the reflection of the woman she had become, strong and untouchable and finally, completely chosen. No, she said simply. I regret believing them, believing I was ever theirs to give away. But this. She turned to face him, seeing recognition and devotion in his eyes. This is exactly where I'm meant to be. Ginho smiled, genuine and rare, and kissed her forehead. Below them, the city pulsed with life and possibility, and Lena felt, for the first time in her life, completely and irrevocably home. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about family and belonging, do us a favor. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and leave a comment telling us your thoughts. Stories like this need to be told, and your support makes that possible. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.